Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video. I'll be showcasing various new updates to my 3DO engine Mechanicus. So a lot of cool stuff to share. Right off the bat, I have weapon switching, and a lot of you will notice this weapon in particular and where this is from. Again, these are just placeholder graphics. Nothing that you see here would be used in a game, I should say. This is just testing out the engine. But so far I have 3 different weapons to test with, and the interesting thing is that 2 of these weapons in particular behave a bit differently. So before, I just had the pistol. However, the shotgun has weapon spread. So if I fire it, you'll see that there's different pallets that scan out into the world, each with their own collision logic. There we go. And you can see that if I get closer to a wall, the spread is more concentrated because they fire out at slight angles from the center. But if I get further back, I guess the spread gets widened. Now, the reason why I added this weapon here is because I wanted to test the automated or fire rate, rapid fire rate. So each time you basically hear a gunshot, that is a bullet flying through the map, checking for collisions. It uses the block map, which was explained in a prior video, to check for collisions with walls or with game objects that are shootable. So let's test these out on some enemies really quick before we continue. You'll notice that the sound of their gunshots, the volume is based on how far they are. Let's use a shotgun for him. So what's nice is that each bullet deals damage. So when you hit someone with a shotgun, it's quite a bit of damage. But the damage amount is all customizable in the weapon's information data. Okay. I also have blood splatter. I don't believe I showed this previously, but if you attack something close up, then blood will splatter on the screen, and the more damage, the more blood. So if you shoot something up close with a shotgun, there'll be quite a bit of blood on the screen. Yeah, just like that. You can step on that duck, which was also taken from Killing Time, just for testing. Actually, during an early test I did, I don't have it in this build, but I made the duck revive dead enemies. It was pretty funny. Maybe I'll put it back. Okay, so let's come down this way. So another change is I added what's commonly known, I guess, as non-Euclidean geometry. So it's a fancy way of saying that things get rather confusing. So for example, here I have this long hallway, right? I'll keep running down this long hallway, and it'll actually go on forever. But if I turn around, you'll see that I'm not very far from where I started. Not as far, rather. So I could make it so that eventually the long hallway will end. Maybe if you have a certain key, something like that. But yeah, for now, in this test, that hallway will just keep on going. But here's another example of that type of geometry. So here you can see that I'm looking down into the hallway from where we came. But if I walk around this room, you'll see that this doesn't quite make sense, because there should be a hallway going through here. If I turn around again, you see that that makes no sense. The trick to this is by teleporting the player at the right time and having the area that you're teleporting to be somewhat duplicated, at least environmentally wise, so you don't notice the switch. So if I bring up this map in the editor, it's not this one, it is this one. You see how I have this area way off to the side, and it looks very similar to this area. These green lines here, these are my teleport specials. And unlike Doom, where it just teleports you to a specific place, has you facing a specific angle and all that, this teleport works a bit differently. This will teleport you, but it won't alter your angle at all, and it won't give you any visual cue that a teleport has occurred. So if you cross through this line, my engine will figure out where to put you over here so that your axis aligned and you don't notice the switch. Same thing if you cross this way, come back around and cross this way, it brings you back over here and aligns you so you don't notice the switch. So this is how I'm pulling this off. All right, so I have another example of where I'm doing some interesting teleporting tricks, but I'll get to that more in a second. All right, another update, I added middle texture support for two-sided line definition. So that's a very fancy way of saying I'm supporting what you're looking at right now, which is, you have this middle texture, and I'm able to make parts of it transparent so you can see through it. So you could use something like that for like a fence, prison bars, whatever you want to be able to see through. So transparent walls, basically. All right. Let's talk about map switching. So I've been running around for a while now, and maps have actually been switched without us realizing it. So right now, exactly, I am switching from map 2 in my test to map 1. And there's no lag, no loading indicator. It just works. This is something that Killing Time for 3DO did, as well as PC. And I wanted to replicate it. And so the way this works is, here's map 2. We were just running through map 2. And if we take a look at map 1 right here, you will notice that this area looks identical to this area. And the reason for that is because when you cross over this line right here, if you're coming from map 2 to map 1, the engine starts preparing map 1 in the background, which is this map over here. And when it's ready, it will swap maps on you. And at the moment that the map swaps, in order for it to appear seamless, you have to be in an area that looks the same, right? So that you don't notice the switch. So everywhere that you cross that will load a separate map, those areas are going to look similar. So if you look at the map that we started in, which I've called map 3, and you look at this area right here, we have a trigger to load a new map, and you cross over, and as you're running through here, we load map 2, which is this one, and you can see that this area looks the same. So, how big this area needs to be, and it depends on how long the engine is going to take to load the following map. And so a smaller map, probably you wouldn't have to have a rather large area duplicated, but for something like this is a pretty big map. I created ample room here, but these are things that could be adjusted and tuned. I'm also throttling that load because the map is loading in a separate thread, and I don't want it to impact the main thread too much. And so it's doing things in phases over time and then when it's ready, it swaps. And the way that I'm keeping track of this is that I have basically 2 buffers to hold map data at a time. And if you, let's say you are in map 1, map 1's loaded, obviously. You go to map 2 gets loaded. Those buffers swap at the right time, putting you in the right place. And let's say you cross back over into map 1. Well, I don't have to load it again. I just swap back again because it's already still in the back buffer. But if you're trying to get to a new area, it's not yet in one of the buffers, then it goes through that asynchronous loading and then swaps at the right time. So let's keep going here. All right. I added gravity. So if I jump out of this little hole here, that's a better effect overall. All right. Here we have a pillar that drops. There we go. Now this is pretty cool. I added water, and you can see that the water is moving. And the way I'm doing that is the engine is modifying the vertices of those polygons. So in the editor, when you create a sector with a special on it, my own custom special, my WAD converter understands that you're trying to put water in that area. So it'll figure out where to put the water line based on the size of, the dimensions of that room. And it'll create the additional polygons that sit on top. And then the engine is smart enough to know that that texture that's associated with the water needs to be transparent. So it'll go ahead and apply the proper updates to the cell, so the 3DO will render it transparently. And then the engine will further know it needs to distort the cells, to simulate movement. So if I jump in here, okay. Currently, I'm using the VDL to update the color palette of the screen and turn everything blue, as you can see. But you'll notice it turns everything blue. Now, if I had like a traditional HUD, like Doom, I could have it stop at a certain row, or I can have like a very small cell that's going to be transparent and colored, and maybe stretch it over the entire screen. I don't know. I'll play with it some more, but you'll notice that the world here is warping a little bit. So the engine knows that because I'm in water, it's going to start modifying the vertices of the quads within it. So that's a pretty cool effect. It also changes the physics. So right now things feel very floaty, and if I fire a weapon, see how everything sounds more muffled and delayed. Here I have just a standard Doom style teleport. Okay, which brings me back out. Okay, so let's keep going. I also added mouse support, but that needs more testing. The 3DO did have a mouse, and that was overkill. Okay, so that was pretty cool. So really quick, I have sound triggers to play audio at certain times. And you'll notice that when I walked into this room, there was nothing obstructing me, right? Well, if I turn around, all of a sudden there's a door here. And if I open that up, I am in a completely different area. So I got this idea from a game called Layers of Fear, where in this game as you're moving about the world, you turn around at any moment and all of a sudden you're in a different area and things just get confusing. So that's what I wanted to recreate. So I technically have 3 different types of teleporting in this engine. There's the Doom style, which is the simplest. There's this one where you can be in a certain area and you will teleport to a different area if you're not facing a certain area. So you can turn around, be somewhere else. Technically you can turn around again and be somewhere else again. So it's interesting. And then I have the teleporting that just tricks you by those non-Euclidean effects that you saw earlier, like walking behind a hallway and you're in a different area, that sort of thing. Don't know if I'm explaining that well enough, but so here I just wanted to showcase, larger, higher ceiling room with some strobes, and that floor there that looks a little bit like toxic lava. You can see that it's also distorting, like the water, but this is not water. This is just a hazardous area that I've marked. So I have God mode on, so it's not hurting me, but it would. So in the editor, I could add a special that my engine will interpret as hazardous. Okay, then I have switches. So here I can either shoot it or interact with it like I do a door. And there we raise some lifts. Okay. Another thing that I've added is enemy infighting. So I created a flag, and if this flag is set on an enemy, if an enemy were to get hit by anything, it will focus on that thing as its target. So that means it would try and get to and attack that thing. So far in my tests, the jackal here, whose back is to me, so he can't see me, is the only thing that I've put the infight flag on. Now I'm going to walk behind him, which is going to cause another enemy to shoot him to show this. You'll notice that every time he gets hurt or attacks, he faces me, even though he shouldn't. But that's only because I only have one attack frame for him, and then the attack frame is just facing the player, because when I first, there are no other graphics really for this sprite to attack in different directions, but that's why it's doing that. But if I had proper frames for all 8 directions, that wouldn't happen. So I'm going to get behind him. Now he's mad. There they are. He killed him. So also the logic that the engine uses for the player when you fire weapons is the same logic that runs when enemies fire their weapons at you. So bullets are actually being traced throughout the world, and taking things into consideration, like this pillar, for example. Had I been standing, right here, he would not have been able to shoot me. So aside from what I've shown, I've done a lot of work in terms of optimization. I have my own sort of configuration file now in JSON format to help bridge things from the editor and WAD converter to the engine. There were some things that were a bit confusing at first, like, for example, how to handle, it's just an example. When you open up a vertical door, and or any kind of door, and you see, different jams, textures for different jams, all those polygons are being created in code through my WAD converter. And how do you determine which textures get used for these things? And for water, for example, if I flag a sector for water, how do I customize it so that the engine knows what the water texture is going to be, so that it can apply the translucency? And so now I have a JSON file with some different configurables in there, and the WAD converter references it. My script that builds all the texture data references it, and some of it actually generates C code for me for the engine, so that I don't have to manually update, for example, how big my texture array needs to be. All I have to do is just put the data into the config file, and the engine will get what it needs. But yeah, well, this is not a very long video, but you know, hopefully you found this interesting. And I'm getting to the point now where pretty soon I think this engine will be ready to make a game from. So I am interested in making an actual game out of this. By the way, everything is running on hardware, and not on this video obviously, but I have tested this on hardware. And for the most part on hardware, it does stay at 30 frames per second. There are some rooms where it drops, but I haven't seen it drop below 20. But I still have more ideas to try and keep a consistent 30 on hardware. So yeah, so stay tuned. There will be more, and I hope you enjoyed.